I really want to dive into the leadership element of you refocus and you're no longer focused on building new product, but rather on operations. Because I think the interesting thing is for you as a leader, you're building this team to help build this organization, and you'd spend a lot of time building a team that was oriented towards a very different priority, and then now you're asking the team to focus on a totally different priority, and that takes a lot of leadership to build one team first of all, but then to transition those priorities. So I think I'll have you kind of recap the story a little bit more, but from my understanding, you had product focused engineers and then you pivoted to internal tools. How did you get the team to refocus? Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how you got buy-in to these new priorities?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think the great thing about the team at Juni, honestly, is that everybody pitches in to further the mission and the vision of the company, and we get a lot of folks who are just they're kind of like all hands on deck for whatever the daily or monthly situation is. But to a certain extent, like change is normal at a startup, and I think a lot of the folks that we had just understood that and were okay with that. So that's one. Like in the hiring process, I think looking for people who understand that priorities shift and that they're more excited about the future of the entire company than they are maybe this week there's something that's different than what was prioritized in the previous week. At the same time, I think it's an exercise for a leader in transparency and talking through why certain things are issues versus not. I also think, engineers are very data backed when they make decisions and understand things. And so that actually helped a lot was to put up the numbers of like, hey, we're actually not able to get this kind of throughput from our instructors because we don't have this availability matching tool, or we see the downtime in these session dashboards, so this many students miss their session. Those kinds of things are very visceral and understandable for folks to size the impact of a project. Um, I actually think some of the things that are much harder to a certain extent are very greenfield, which is kind of like that new product development, because you have to get folks to buy in that a direction that has no data is an important one to take. And usually that's more like, hey, how are we positioning ourselves in the market? What are like initial indicators that we're seeing from user feedback, etc. But to a certain extent, I had a easier problem because I had a lot of data to say, like, this is clearly an issue. We're seeing capacity constraints because of these reasons. And so it was a lot easier actually to shift that way. Versus I think if you have a team that's, hired in for a very specialized task and then you ask them to focus on something else, that's where you get into more of the issues. So kind of solve that as a hiring problem, but then also using data to kind of communicate when something would change.